Another delightful evening inside Dr. Frankenbike's laboratory. Now, of all these dozens of bikes, probably the one that's been most popular on this channel is the 1994 S-Works Prestige. And as I said when I was restoring it, it's very much a work in progress. It's still not done. So as some new parts have arrived, I thought this video might be a good opportunity to talk about this stuff, Shimano XTR. Now, today when we talk about a group set, we basically mean all the gears and all the brakes, including the controls. But in 1992, when XTR came out, a group set meant pretty much all the finishing kit on a bike. It included the hubs and quick releases, it included the seat quick release, the seat post. You could even get an XTR headset. Now, as I said previously, I'm going to try and get this thing upgraded to as much of the original first generation M900 XTR as I can possibly lay my hands on. But there are a few exceptions, and I'm going to talk today about why. When XTR came over here, the industry standard top of the range gear was this XT. And after many years of obsession and saving, this is the XT group set that I managed to assemble. And having put this on my first serious bike, I obviously thought I was the general. And of course, the testament to its quality is that it's still running today and it's still looking absolutely beautiful. And I had pretty much the whole group set, including the hubs. As you'll know from previous videos, this is what the shifters and brakes looked like at the time. Then XTR came along and it absolutely blasted XT out the water in terms of finish, lightweight, and of course smoothness and reliability of operation. This was aimed squarely at the pros and the multimillionaires because it was almost twice the price of XT then. And of course on the used market now, this stuff from the early 90s, this first generation M900 it's called, is so obscenely expensive that even my shadowy cartel of the aforementioned reclusive multimillionaire gentlemen collectors still find it hard to lay hands on complete group sets because it's just so scarce. I have finally managed to get most of the bits for this bike, and I'm going to show you some of them today. Now, once again, we're talking about this chain set, which on many previous videos I have griped about because of the state that the crank arms are in. The glorious machined aluminium chain rings are in great nick, but these crank arms have proved very hard to restore. And despite advice from various viewers, and thanks for that, the reason why I haven't yet polished these up is well, for one main reason. XTR was famous for this beautiful sort of satin finish, whereas XT, if you look at the original XT from the same sort of era, was brushed bare alloy. So if XT got rough, you could just polish it back and get it looking quite nice. Whereas with this XTR, if I polish it, all I'm going to do is strip off all of the nice satin finish, or rather what's left of it, and just make it look like XT. So I would rather have a sort of patinated satin XTR than a very, very shiny XTR that looks like XT. So I'm going to, for the time being, put up with this rather crusty finish until I can work out how to restore the actual satin. Other bits, you'll have seen from my cantilever brakes madness video how much I love the feel and the action and the sound of these classic XT cantilevers. If you compare those to the XTR that are already on the S-Works, XTR you can see are drilled out for lightweight and again have that lovely satin finish. And with titanium pivot bolts and the original XTR brake pads, when I can eventually find some, these really were quite special. Now, a note on parts like this, back in the day you could buy far more exotic and expensive things like cantilever brakes from low volume builders in the US like Paul Components or Grafton, which were even more expensive, rare and exotic. But XTR obviously had the benefit of Shimano's R&D, and also of course most of the pros that were winning the races at the world level were using XTR. So here's what's going on to the S-Works next. I managed to lay hands on these STI units, which stands for Shimano Total Integration, because it's this principle of levers with the gear shifter pods attached. XTR was the first time that we ever saw 8-speed cassettes and 8-speed shifters. Prior to that, everything, well, all the top bikes were 7-speed. It was also the first time we ever saw these trigger shifters, which of course are now ubiquitous, by which I mean you've got the rapid fire action, which was already quite commonplace, but instead of a release switch above it, the release switch was opposite it, clicking in the opposite direction. So this was quite some innovation, and of course the finish is absolutely stunning. Is there anything wrong with the XT ones that are already on the S-Works? No, they're absolutely beautiful and they're definitely going to go to a good home. And lastly for today, we've got to replace this front mech. Now there's nothing wrong with this XT front mech that's already on the S-Works. In fact, the thing is absolutely dependable, it's beautiful. But the point is, I've got hundreds of them. There's one on the Quinny, there's one on this Kona here, there's one on this Dynatech Titanium. And while I do love them, the fact is they're just not quite rare and exotic enough to make this bike as special as it deserves to be. Now the only problem with procuring this XTR front mech, again M900 first generation from 1993 this one is if you're not James Bond bidding for Fabergé eggs in an auction house in Monte Carlo, then you're not going to like the prices. This has never been used, and it cost literally 10 times what the equivalent XT one would. A used one, covered in rust on the outer plates and clearly very battered, was still 3 times what a very good XT one would cost. The market is insane. I think COVID has played its role because everybody's gone bike restoration mad. So I had to wait and lurk and eventually just caved and bought this. I don't do unboxings very often on this channel for the simple reason that I'd always rather buy used and clean stuff up and restore, and usually the crustier the better. Now it's almost impossible to find crusty XTR. 99% of the people in the world that have this stuff know exactly what it is and how valuable it is. And so finding rough stuff on eBay to restore is almost impossible. These were immaculate when I got them. And as for this, here's the unboxing. So 28-29mm, I forget exactly, but the correct clamp size and top pull. Obviously the combination of requirements made this incredibly hard to find. So looking for a crusty one that I could polish up in my usual restoration style, I just got bored and ended up buying a new one because it was there. And here it is, absolutely beautiful. So we'll get that on today. And finally, just a note on the XTR bits that I will and won't be looking for next. Now, as I said, back in the old days, groupset meant much more than just brakes and gears. The XTR seat posts are incredibly sought after now and ridiculously expensive. The reason why seat posts aren't considered part of a groupset anymore is the world quickly woke up to the fact that riders buying expensive bikes would always spec their own choice of seat post, and there was so much choice that Shimano ones weren't that in demand. Now an XTR one to replace this beautiful Ritchie made S-Works one would be pointless because this one's already exotic and stunning enough. And the same goes for the headset. Now the XTR headsets, when they came out in the early 90s, M900, were threaded because of course most bikes in those days were still using the old system of a threaded steerer with the headset lock nut down here and then a quill stem that went down inside it. This A headset system, which we can talk about in great depth at some point, but is not for today, was very, very new in '94 when this bike came out, and this was considered absolutely pioneering technology. Now, to put an XTR headset on this with a threaded steerer and put an old-fashioned quill stem on it would be a huge downgrade, because what made this S-Works Prestige so incredibly expensive and sought after in the first place was this, well, one of the things was this titanium stem, and a titanium A-head stem that clamps onto a threadless steerer in 1994 was quite some jewellery to have. I am, however, interested in procuring an original XTR M900 8-speed cassette and also hubs. Now this is currently XT. It's good as new, shiny and beautiful, so it would be rather obscene to just chuck it out. So until I find a useful home for what we've got, I think replacing it with hundreds of quid's worth of XTR would probably be a bit excessive. So for the time being, you'll have to forgive me for having an XT cassette on this bike. You'd have to be a serious nerd with a magnifying glass to actually tell the difference. Now recabling's a bit fiddly, especially if, like me, you want to be tight and reuse the existing cables. It kind of means poking them out backwards through the shifter pods, but it's not impossible. There you go. And as for recabling the brakes, that's easy because everything, including the barrel adjusters, is slotted. So the cable just comes straight out. There we go. And the beauty of STI, and no, I'm not talking about syphilis, is you can just use one 4mm pinch bolt to take the whole unit off and slide the new one on. Well, that's the end of today's little project. I'm sure, like me, you enjoy watching rap videos with the Rolls Royces and the Gulfstream jets and the Diamonds, but none of them's got any of this. So, in conclusion, in your face, DJ Khaled.